A heart-wrenching tale of betrayal, redemption, and second chances that will leave you speechless. When Victoria Sterling was forced to choose between her unborn child and everything she'd built, made the ultimate sacrifice. Now, 5 years later, fate brings her face to face with the billionaire husband who destroyed her life. But this time, she's not the broken woman who fled in the niches, become someone he never expected. Greetings, fellow dreamers. This tale is filled with love, secrets, and a twist you'll never forget. Step into the tale. Rain hammered against the windows of the downtown hotel room as Victoria Sterling packed the last of her belongings into a worn duffel bag. Her hands shook as she folded Emma's tiny pink dress, the fabric still smelling of her daughter's strawberry shampoo. The decision that had torn her heart in two still burned like acid in her chest. 3 hours earlier, she had signed those damning divorce papers. The fluorescent bathroom light flickered as she stared at her reflection, her green eyes hollow and rimmed with exhaustion. At 5 months pregnant, her body was just beginning to show the subtle curves of new life, secrets she had guarded like a state treasure. Jonathan couldn't know about this baby, not now. Not after what he had done to destroy her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Sarah in Portland. Safe house ready. No questions asked. Victoria's throat tightened as she remembered the manufactured evidence Jonathan had presented to the board. The calculated cruelty in his steel-gray eyes as he'd systematically dismantled her life. The photographs with Michael Harrison, her innocent friend, twisted into something sinister. The patents she'd developed independently, manipulated to look like payments for corporate espionage. "You're a brilliant woman, Victoria," Margaret Cross had whispered as she'd handed over the pen. "But brilliance means nothing without proof, and Jonathan controls all the proof." The elevator descended through 40 floors of her former empire, each floor marking another piece of her identity stripped. Way co-founder, innovator, mother, wife. All of it reduced to nothing more than signatures on legal documents. Outside, the Portland-bound bus idled in the rain, its engine rumbling like a heartbeat. Victoria clutched her stomach protectively, feeling the flutter of tiny movements within. This child would never know the father who had destroyed its mother. This child would grow up free from Jonathan Blackwood's poison. As the bus pulled away from the city lights, Victoria pressed her palm against the cold window and made a silent vow. One day when she was strong enough, when she had built something Jonathan couldn't touch or manipulate, she would return. Not for revenge, but for justice. 5 years passed like a storm that finally breaks. The conference room of Harrison Tech gleamed under morning sunlight as Victoria Reeves, now the company's chief innovation officer, reviewed the acquisition proposal that had landed on her desk that morning. The letterhead made her blood freeze. Quantum Industries. Her assistant knocked softly. "Ms. Reeves, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about the quantum deal." Victoria's breath caught as the door opened. Jonathan Blackwood stepped into her office, his presence filling the space like smoke from a fire. 5 years had added silver to his temples and lines around his eyes, but those steel-gray eyes remained as cold and calculating as ever. He stopped dead when he saw her, his confident expression cracking like ice. "Hello, Jonathan," she said, her voice steady, despite the chaos raging in her chest. "I believe we have some business to discuss." Jonathan's hand gripped the doorframe, as if the world had tilted beneath his feet. The woman sitting behind the mahogany desk bore little resemblance to the broken figure who had fled his office 5 years ago. Victoria's auburn hair was shorter now, framing a face that had lost its softness and gained something far more dangerous: confidence. "You're supposed to be dead," he whispered, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Disappointed?" Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying him with the cool detachment of a scientist examining a specimen. "I'm sure my obituary would have made excellent press for Quantum Industries." The disgraced wife who couldn't live with her shame, Jonathan stepped into the office. Closing the door behind him with deliberate care, "I hired investigators. They said you died in a car accident outside Seattle. There was a body, dental records. Money can buy many things, Jonathan, including new identities." Victoria stood, her movements fluid and controlled. She wore a charcoal business suit that spoke of power and success, a far cry from the trembling woman he remembered. Did you really think I would just disappear quietly into the night? What do you want? His voice carried the authority that had built empires, but Victoria heard the tremor beneath it. I want what you stole from me. She moved to the window overlooking the Portland skyline. My reputation, my work, my daughter. The mention of Emma hit him like a physical blow. Emma is fine. She's happy. Is she? Victoria turned, and for the first time, Jonathan saw past her professional mask to the mother's pain beneath. Does she remember me at all? Or have you erased me completely from her life? She thinks you abandoned her, Jonathan said. The cruelty automatic, learned. She thinks you chose your guilt over your family. Victoria's composure cracked. Just for a moment, revealing the raw wound that had never healed. And what about our son, Jonathan? The child you never knew existed. The color drained from Jonathan's face as the words hit their mark. What son? I was 5 months pregnant when you destroyed my life, Victoria said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I chose to protect him from you. To give him a chance at a life free from your poison, Jonathan sank into the chair across from her desk, his powerful frame suddenly looking fragile. You were pregnant? With my child? He's for now. Brilliant, curious, kind, everything you'll never be. Victoria returned to her seat, her green eyes blazing with suppressed emotion. His name is Lucas, and he thinks his father is a hero who died saving lives. I won't let you corrupt that. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Filled with years of pain and unanswered questions, Jonathan's mind raced, calculating, processing this new information like data in one of his algorithms. The acquisition, he said finally, his business instincts reasserting themselves. Harrison Tech wants to buy Quantum Industries. Victoria smiled, and it was sharp as a blade. Not by Jonathan, absorb. Your company is hemorrhaging money. The patents you stole from me have expired, and without my innovations. Quantum Industries is just another failing tech company. Those patents were community property. The courts agreed. The courts were presented with fabricated evidence, Victoria countered. But justice has a way of finding its mark, doesn't it? Jonathan leaned forward, his steel-gray eyes narrowing. What are you really after, Victoria? Revenge? I'm after what I've always been after. Jonathan, truth. She opened a manila folder on her desk, spreading photographs across the mahogany surface. These are the real records of my patents, filed independently months before our divorce. These are the real financial statements showing where my royalty payments went. Charity work you know nothing about. In these, she placed the final set of documents on the desk. Are testimonies from your board members? Admitting they knew the evidence against me was fabricated. Jonathan stared at the documents, his empire crumbling in black and white before his eyes. Margaret Cross sends her regards, Victoria said softly. Conscience is a funny thing, Jonathan. It has a way of catching up to people. A soft knock interrupted the tense silence. Victoria's assistant peered through the door. Ms. Reeves, your son's school called. There's been an incident. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the hospital corridor as Victoria rushed toward the pediatric emergency room, her heels echoing against polished linoleum. Behind her, Jonathan's footsteps matched her frantic pace, uninvited but persistent. You don't have to be here, she said, without turning around, her voice tight with worry. My son is hurt, Jonathan replied, the possessive pronoun hanging in the air between them like a challenge. Victoria stopped abruptly, whirling to face him. Your son? 5 minutes of knowing he exists doesn't make you his father. Through the emergency room doors, she could see Lucas sitting on an examination table, his small face pale but alert. Even from a distance, the resemblance to Jonathan was unmistakable. The same strong jawline, the same intelligent eyes, the same stubborn set to his shoulders. Ms. Reeves? A young nurse approached them. Lucas is asking for you. The doctor says he has a mild concussion from the playground fall, but he should be fine. Victoria nodded, her relief palpable. Can I see him? As they entered the examination room, Lucas looked up with a smile that could have powered cities. Mommy, I fell off the monkey bars, but I didn't cry. You're so brave, sweetheart, Victoria said, smoothing his dark hair away from a small bandage on his forehead. Lucas's curious gaze shifted to Jonathan, who had remained silent in the doorway. Who's the man, Mommy? Victoria's throat constricted. He's someone Mommy used to know, baby. Are you a doctor? Lucas asked Jonathan directly, his 4-year-old directness cutting through the adult complexity surrounding them. Jonathan stepped closer, his voice softer than Victoria had heard it in years. No, I'm not a doctor. I'm Jonathan. What's your favorite thing to do, Lucas? I like to build things, Lucas said proudly. Mommy says I'm good at making stuff work. I built a robot that can walk by itself. The words hit Jonathan like lightning. The same passion for creation, the same innovative spirit that had drawn him to Victoria all those years ago, lived on in their son. That's incredible, Jonathan said, his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. I like building things too. After the doctor cleared Lucas for discharge, Victoria signed the paperwork while Jonathan waited in the corridor. The weight of the day's revelations pressed down on them both like a physical force. I want to be part of his life, Jonathan said as they walked toward the parking garage. Victoria stopped beside her car, Lucas already buckled safely in his booster seat. You destroyed my life, Jonathan. You turned everyone against me, stole my work, and made me choose between my dignity and my daughter. Why would I ever trust you with my son? Because he's mine too, Jonathan said, his voice raw with emotion. Because I was wrong. Because I know what it feels like to lose a child. What are you talking about? Jonathan's composure finally shattered completely. Emma's been asking about you every day for 5 years. She draws pictures of the 3 of us together. She prays every night for her mommy to come home. I told myself I was protecting her from the truth, but I was protecting myself from my guilt. Victoria felt tears threatening for the first time since entering his office. Jonathan, what really happened? Why did you do this to us? Because I was terrified, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Genesis Corp wasn't just copying our products. They were buying them. From someone inside our company? I found the real evidence 3 months after you left. Victoria's blood turned to ice. What evidence? Robert Ashton, my CFO, my oldest friend, my best man at our wedding. He was selling our innovations to Genesis for years. When I started getting suspicious, he needed a scapegoat. He suggested I look at you, fed me manipulated evidence, laid on my jealousy about Michael Harrison. The parking garage seemed to spin around. Victoria, as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. You knew? All this time, you knew I was innocent? I've known for 4 years, Jonathan whispered. I've been trying to find you ever since. To apologize? To make things right. Victoria slapped him, the sound echoing through the concrete space like a gunshot. You let me believe I was a traitor. You let me lose my daughter. You cost me 5 years with Emma because you were too proud to admit you were wrong. I was trying to protect, don't. Victoria's voice cracked like thunder. Don't you dare say you were protecting anyone. You were protecting your ego, your reputation, your perfect image as the brilliant Jonathan Blackwood, who never makes mistakes. She climbed into her car, her hands shaking as she started the engine. Through the window, she looked at the man who had once been everything to her. I'll be in touch about Emma, she said. But if you think one conversation erases 5 years of pain, you're more delusional than I thought. As she drove away, Jonathan stood alone in the parking garage, watching the taillights of his family disappear into the Portland night. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text message that would change everything. Time to face the music, old friend. The shareholders' meeting is tomorrow. Hope you're ready to explain everything. Robert Ashton. The boardroom at Quantum Industries felt like a battlefield as shareholders filed in for the emergency meeting. Victoria sat at the far end of the polished table, no longer the broken woman who had once signed away her life in this very room. Beside her sat Michael Harrison, now revealed as Harrison Tech's CEO and her closest ally in the acquisition. Jonathan entered with Robert Ashton, the silver-haired CFO who had orchestrated Victoria's downfall with surgical precision. The 2 men had been friends for over a decade, building Quantum Industries from a startup dream into a billion-dollar empire. Now, That friendship was about to become the weapon that destroyed everything. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert called the meeting to order. His voice carrying the same false warmth Victoria remembered from her trial 5 years ago. We're here to address Harrison Tech's hostile takeover attempt and the concerning involvement of a former employee who was terminated for corporate espionage. Victoria stood slowly, her green eyes scanning the faces around the table. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet her gaze. They remembered her, remembered the night they had condemned her without trial. I think we should start with the truth this time, Victoria said, her voice cutting through the tension like steel. The truth about who really sold our secrets to Genesis Corp. She opened her briefcase and placed a stack of documents on the table. These are banking records from offshore accounts belonging to Robert Ashton. Notice the deposits that coincide perfectly with every major information leaked to our competitors. Robert's face remained impassive, but Jonathan could see the calculation in his oldest friend's eyes. This is desperation, Victoria. Forged documents won't change what you did. These aren't forged, Victoria replied calmly. They were obtained through a federal investigation that's been ongoing for 18 months. An investigation triggered when I presented evidence to the FBI after discovering the truth about my own framing. She placed another set of documents on the table. These are communications between Robert Ashton and Genesis Corp executives dating back 7 years. Years before I ever met Michael Harrison for coffee. Jonathan's world tilted as he read the emails. Recognizing his best friend's writing style, his casual cynicism, his calculated betrayal of everything they had built together. You son of a bitch, Jonathan whispered, his voice barely audible. You destroyed my family for money? Robert stood, his mask of false sincerity finally slipping away to reveal the cold opportunist beneath. Your family was collateral damage, Jonathan. Victoria was getting too close to the truth. Her innovations were making quantum industries too independent. Genesis needed us dependent on their funding, their technology. She had to be neutralized. Neutralized? Victoria's voice rose with righteous fury. I was a person, not a business problem. I was a mother, a wife, a human being whose life you destroyed for corporate profit. You were a brilliant woman who asked too many questions. Robert shot back. Your quantum computing breakthroughs would have made us completely independent. Genesis couldn't allow that. They needed control. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. Jonathan stared at his oldest friend, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Emma, Jonathan said suddenly. You've been around Emma all this time. You helped raise her while I thought her mother was a traitor? Robert shrugged with chilling indifference. Children adapt. She's fine. That was the moment Jonathan Blackwood's legendary control finally shattered. He lunged across the table, his hands reaching for Robert's throat before security guards pulled him back. You let me destroy the woman I loved. Jonathan roared, struggling against the restraints. You let me lose my family, my son. 5 years of my daughter's life believing her mother abandoned her. Victoria watched the chaos with grim satisfaction, no joy. The truth had finally emerged. But the cost had been devastating for everyone involved. The FBI will be here within the hour, she announced to the room. Robert Ashton will be arrested for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Quantum Industries will be absorbed by Harrison Tech, and all patents stolen from me will be returned to their rightful owner. As security escorted Robert from the room, turned back with a cold smile. You think you've won, Victoria? Jonathan will never forgive himself for what he did to you. You'll never get your family back. Sometimes the damage is too deep to heal. The room fell silent as the door closed behind him. Victoria and Jonathan stared at each other across the boardroom table. 5 years of pain and betrayal hanging between them like an unbridgeable chasm. Victoria, Jonathan began, his voice broken. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe some things can't be fixed, she replied quietly. Maybe some choices can't be undone. Her phone buzzed with a text from her babysitter. Lucas is asking when you're coming home. Emma Blackwood just called. She wants to talk to her mommy. The playground were it all. Began was empty except for 2 children and the parents who had failed them in different ways. Emma, now 9 years old with her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin, pushed her 4-year-old half-brother on the swing, while Victoria and Jonathan sat on opposite ends of a weathered park bench. "She's beautiful," Victoria whispered, watching her daughter with the hunger of 5 lost years. "She looks so much like you when you were young." "She has your laugh," Jonathan replied, "and your way of tilting her head when she's thinking through a problem. I see you in her every day." Emma had been hesitant at first, clinging to Jonathan's leg when Victoria approached. But children possess a resilience that adults have forgotten, and within an hour, she was showing her mother the card tricks she had learned and the stories she had written about a princess who traveled to distant lands looking for her lost queen. "Lucas is incredible," Jonathan said, watching his son carefully help Emma down from the swing. "He has your innovative mind and your compassion. He wants to meet Emma's daddy," Victoria said softly. "I told him his father was a hero, and he's been asking if heroes can come back from heaven." The weight of their choices hung between them like fog. Jonathan had spent 5 years believing he was protecting his daughter from a mother who had betrayed them. Victoria had spent 5 years protecting her son from a father she believed was incapable of love. Both had been wrong in ways that mattered. "I've been thinking about what Robert said," Jonathan admitted. "About some damage being too deep to heal?" Victoria turned to face him, studying the lines that grief and guilt had carved into his features. "And what do you think?" "I think he's right about some things. I think what I did to you, to us, can't be undone. I think the trust we had is broken beyond repair." He paused, watching Emma teach Lucas how to pump his legs to make the swing go higher. "But I think we might be able to build something new, something different, something better. For them," Victoria said, nodding toward their children. "For them. And maybe, eventually, for us." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, processing years of pain and the possibility of something beyond mere forgiveness. "I won't pretend this is easy, Jonathan. I won't pretend that loving you didn't nearly destroy me. But watching them together, seeing Lucas meet his sister and Emma find her mother, ... double quotes, she trailed off as Emma ran toward them, her face bright with excitement. "Mommy, Lucas wants to know if you can read him the story I wrote about the dragon who learned to be nice. And Daddy, can we have pizza for dinner? All of us together." The simple request from their daughter's innocent heart cut through years of adult complexity and pain. Victoria and Jonathan looked at each other over Emma's head, seeing not the people they had been, but the people they might become. "Pizza sounds perfect, sweetheart," Victoria said, taking Emma's small hand in hers. "All of us together?" Emma asked, her voice tentative with hope. Jonathan reached out, his fingers brushing Victoria's as they both held their daughter's hands. "All of us together." As they walked toward Jonathan's car, Lucas running ahead to explore while Emma chattered about her favorite pizza toppings, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in 5 years, the possibility of home. "This doesn't fix everything," she said, quietly to Jonathan. "I know," he replied, "but it's a beginning." The Portland sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and purple as 2 broken people began the long journey toward healing. Guided by the laughter of children who had waited their entire lives to be a family, some betrayals cut too deep to forget. Some choices leave scars that never fully fade. But sometimes love is stronger than the worst things we do to each other. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is forgive, not because someone deserves it, but because we choose to be bigger than our pain. Sometimes going home means accepting that you can never really go back, only forward into something entirely new. The end.